Hi
Hey guys.
guys.
Okay, so this is our second podcast
Our second
that we're gonna
episode.
have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so hi, my name is Vienna Lai,
And my name is Rosie Yang.
and today we're gonna be talking about the psychological impacts of education. So we're still
Mm-hmm.
kind of focusing on that like teenager aspect, but we're gonna focus instead on now education and how that
Yeah.
impacts teenagers psychologically.
Yeah, exactly. Have you ever sat in a classroom, looked around, and thought, wow, everyone really seems to know what they're doing, and I'm just kind of waiting to find out, or, I don't really understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Or maybe as a kid, you remember that you love to draw, you really love the visual arts, but now staring at a blank page for a school project, just, trying to get back into, the groove, your mind just feels blank. Where did the creativity go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or even like who hasn't laid in bed at 1 or 2 in the morning completely exhausted with a test the next day thinking that I have absolutely nothing to give? Well, today we're going to be talking about something that affects us, every single one of us, but rarely gets discussed in classrooms itself, which is the psychological impacts of education. So more generally, we're going to be diving into imposter syndrome, something that we're going to be talking about a lot. And then also the quiet death of creativity, as well as the epidemic of burnout.
Yeah, so honestly, education is, well, obviously there are so many benefits to having quality
Mm-hmm.
education. And obviously us in Canada specifically, we are so lucky to be able to have such good education.
Yeah.
And that will really improve our standard of living and our future in general. So obviously, this is not to undermine like anything about education,
Oh, yeah,
but
for
this is
sure.
just kind of to highlight how teenagers really can internalize some like negative aspects of education that aren't as widely discussed. So, for example, just kind of to show or just kind of to highlight that education really plays a central role in teenagers. Obviously, we spend a lot of our time at school or studying, etc. So
Mm-hmm.
as a result, education plays a huge role on a person's like cognitive, emotional, and social development, especially for teenagers. As we highlighted in the last episode, how our brains are still kind of developing and we're changing a lot. Education plays like a huge role in that development. So schools are really designed to develop knowledge, discipline, problem solving skills, and just to help us prepare for our future.
Now, to understand these impacts, we also need to kind of recognize that modern education systems wasn't actually designed with mental health in mind.
Yeah.
Now, it was actually designed back in during the Industrial Revolution to create compliant workers. Now, people who could basically show up on time, who could follow instructions, and also repeat tasks.
Mm-hmm.
So almost like living in like a cyclical kind of rhythm in
Mm-hmm.
life. But, well, what's the problem to this? Well, we're obviously students. We're not factory workers, right? We're human beings with complex brains that need creativity, autonomy, and also rest to thrive in our everyday lives. And when the system ignores those needs, our brains respond in predictable ways, such as anxiety as a consequence, or even disengagement and exhaustion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a lot of obviously that this has changed a little bit over the years or over the decades. We
Mm-hmm.
see a lot more emphasis being placed on mental health. For example, we have the introduction of guidance counselors in high schools, where students, if they feel anxious or they have issues, they can always reach out to their counselors. So obviously this has improved, but still with modern education, we still have like standardized testing,
Yeah.
which kind of creates this like image on all the students where we're just our worth is a grade. Basically
Yeah.
we're only worth as much as what our grade is, and so this creates a lot of like negative emotions as a result. For example, there's academic competition, or just a feeling of like I'm just not enough,
Yeah.
if you get a bad grade, and there's obviously these expectations. um And yeah, these are all results of our education system. And so this can really impact the student's psychology. And this obviously introduces so much pressure, expectation, and just a feeling of almost like worthlessness, that a lot of students feel that they're not enough if they get a bad grade or if their grades are progressively dropping as the years go on. Um, and yeah, so education isn't only about what students learn. It's
Mm-hmm.
really also about how students see themselves, how they can develop their abilities, and how they can identify their potential.
Yeah, it's so much more than that. And one concept that we did want to highlight today is something called imposter syndrome. Now, maybe some of you have heard it, maybe not. Just very simply, imposter syndrome is the or not the external, the internal experience of believing that you're not as competent as others perceive you to
Mm-hmm.
be,
Yeah.
or basically as other people see you to be. Now, it's kind of a feeling that you're quote unquote a fraud,
Yeah.
and it's only a matter of time before that you're exposed. It's just that like really um that feeling, that anxious
Yeah, like that
feeling.
sense of doom, like that
Yeah,
impending doom
exactly. That
almost.
something's gonna happen, like no matter what you do. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
not a good thing to be feeling,
Yeah.
especially. And just like a really quick analogy, like imagine you're at a party and everyone seems to really know each other. They walk around, introduce themselves, blah blah blah, and they're laughing, talking so easily, and you're kind of just standing there, maybe with your phone, with your drink, and just thinking like, oh, they're going to realize that I don't really belong here any second now.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of that thought. You're in a way, you're kind of like quote unquote overthinking. And just to put it so simply, that is imposter syndrome. But instead of a party, it's your entire life and your classes, your friendships, as well as your extracurriculars. And so it's not really about being like incompetent. In fact, it often affects the highest achievers most intensely, highest achievers in class, or even in the future in the work field. This could be very common. It's almost like the more you accomplish, the more you fear being found out. And for students, it often starts with comparison. Like in other podcasts, in the future, we also will be talking about social media. But just to very quickly like mention it, just as simple as scrolling through social media, seeing everyone's, maybe highlights their stories, or hearing classmates ask quote unquote smart questions, or getting a grade that feels too good to be true. And the message we internalize, like for example, like I got lucky, I fooled them this time, but next time they'll see the real me. It's kind of that concept that really is what imposter syndrome is.
Mm-hmm. And it's almost like isolating or alienating in a way because you feel kind of different or separated from the rest of whatever group you're in. Maybe in class you feel like, oh, like I didn't deserve this mark, or I'm kind of like fooling everyone. I don't deserve to be here. They're all better than me. Stuff like that. It's just very isolating and overwhelming in a way. And these thoughts, they kind of like multiply as you keep thinking that you're not enough or that you don't belong there.
Mm-hmm.
Experiences, you kind of keep relating them to these thoughts, and it just creates this cycle of like overthinking, of that you're an imposter, that you don't deserve to be there, and stuff like that. And that really, really can take a toll on a person's mental health
Yeah.
because they just feel worthless or like empty all the time. And that um is more important. That feeling we should really focus on more so than how well you do in school. I think making sure everyone feels comfortable, making sure everyone mentally is healthy, I think we really, really need to place a bigger emphasis
Mm-hmm.
throughout education on that, more so than you got 100% good job, you
Mm-hmm.
got 90% good job. We should really focus on how competition or how perception can really impact an individual.
Yeah, and honestly, I just believe that this imposter syndrome, it definitely, for those who do experience it, it can definitely take a toll on your mental health, as Vienna mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you think of it in the most simple, in the most basic way ever, it's almost like no matter which public space you're in, or whether public or private space you're in, you just always keep having these negative thoughts in your mind that you're not good enough, that other people are better, or people have negative thoughts on you as well. And it's just this constant cycle of thinking you're not good enough, and you're just putting yourself down. And I feel like especially during this growth and developmental phase, it's just so harmful to your mental health in general.
Exactly. And this kind of highlights how we're having, not we, how
Yeah.
teenagers can have like self-doubt, despite this evidence that they are succeeding. But just the imposter syndrome really, really creates that self-doubt and that lack of confidence. And as a result, this can be carried into adulthood, or it can be carried into the future. And that lack of confidence really shows in life. And
Mm-hmm.
that is really, really harmful to someone's development, to someone's future.
Yeah.
And so we should really kind of focus on this,
Yeah,
in
for sure.
school. And at the same time, of course, because imposter syndrome, it makes you feel like you're not enough, or it makes you feel like isolated. That creates anxiety around your academic performance, because you're thinking, oh, this time I just got lucky, but
Mm-hmm.
next time is when it'll all blow up. Next time is when I'll mess up. And that creates anxiety. Kind of thinking that like the sense of impending doom, the sense that like it's all gonna like blow up in my face someday, like that creates anxiety, and you're like anxious, like waiting for that moment to happen. And because of this anxiety, it can lead to like a reluctance to participate in class, because again, you have self-doubt, you're not confident, you're anxious all the time, you're not going to participate. Socially, you're a little less acceptable in a way,
Mm-hmm.
because you're not really social, you don't want to participate, you're like hiding into your shell, you know
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and yeah, and that's just like fear, fear of challenges, fear of
Yeah.
taking initiative, all of that.
Exactly. Overall, yeah. And like, like studies have suggested that up to 70%, like approximately 70 to 80% of people will experience at least one episode of imposter syndrome in their lives. And it's particularly also most common among high achieving students and those from underrepresented groups in competitive environments. And so even if you as a listener, or even us, like, who we didn't even know what imposter syndrome was until this episode. Even if you don't know the name of it, perhaps you may have experienced it once in your lifetime. Who knows? It just goes to show how common all of these things can be. So yeah.
Yeah, and for example, I can give like two examples, not
Mm-hmm.
personally, but like, a lot of university students I have heard, they feel like they were admitted by mistake, or they're not good enough to be in their program or their school. And that just really, really creates this lack of confidence, because you're thinking, oh, everyone is here for a reason,
Yeah.
but I'm here on accident. And that's just really perpetuating that lack of confidence. Um and just the feeling that you're not good enough, despite
Mm-hmm.
that you have like academic evidence to show it. You've gotten good grades, maybe you've participated in extracurriculars and clubs, but you just feel like you're not good enough.
Yeah.
And that's really, really detrimental to your mental health and to your overall like emotion, and how you perceive and how you like move forward with challenges and stuff like that.
Yeah, honestly, I also feel like overall, all of this, like experiencing all of this, just really like prevents your academic growth and your academic
Yeah,
potential
yeah,
as
yeah.
a whole. Because, like what you said, like if a student got into a university, there's obviously reasons as to why they got admitted, because they deserve the place. They
Exactly,
deserve to be
exactly.
there. But having these negative thoughts, I feel like really holds you back from your true potential. You could really thrive, but because of all of this, it's just more difficult to do so.
And also, if you just live in that constant like fear or anxiety around
Yeah.
certain things, because you have a lack of confidence, because you feel like an imposter, that also really hinders your growth and development
Yeah.
and your potential. Because as we said, schools are, you're supposed to find your potential, find your ability, or your, or what you want to do. But if you're too scared, or too um
Like too
yeah,
anxious
yeah,
to
too
do
anxious
so.
to be yourself, because you think you're not good enough, you think you shouldn't be there, that just kind of puts a stop to your potential, to where you
Mm-hmm.
could be.
Yeah.
If you weren't compared to everyone, if there wasn't so much competition, so much comparison, all of that. um yeah, and honestly, like, just people who also receive like high grades, they also think like, oh, like, maybe, oh, the teacher graded like really generously this time, or like I just got lucky, I just happened to know this concept.
Yeah.
That just really highlights how you feel like anything you do just isn't good enough because it's not you that did it. It's a result of all of these external factors that allowed you to succeed, and that hinders your confidence, doesn't let you grow. Yeah, and it's just a huge impact to your mental health.
Yeah, 100%. And like another concept as well that I feel like the education system may kind of prevent is kind of the like creativity in students. I feel like that's another issue that I kind of want to address. Like the kind of the reduction of creativity. Now, just the word creativity, I feel like a lot of people think of like, oh, the arts, like visual arts, this arts, maybe drawing. But it isn't just the ability to be artistic and to draw. It's about the gradual narrowing of like divergent thinking. That is a reduction
Yes.
of creativity, and basically the ability to see multiple possibilities and ask the question, what if this, what if this, wait, but why, and all those questions, and to solve problems in an original way. That is the reduction of creativity, when you are prevented from kind of exploring your reality around you. And so, like honestly, think of your brain like a tree with many different branches sprouting in many different directions. And as a child, or as a young child, those branches are wild and also sprawling, and you ask endless questions to your parents, or even imagine impossible things and connect ideas freely because you're a kid, right? You're curious of like all that around you. But as you go to school, the system starts pruning those branches, and it rewards the ones that grow straight up towards the quote unquote right answer, while cutting away the ones that wander into curiosity, experimentation, or play. And so eventually you kind of have a tree that's tall and efficient, but has lost its fullness, its shade, and its ability to grow in new directions.
Yeah, and this is often as a result of like education systems that are emphasizing, a standard way of testing. There's only one right answer,
Yeah.
and like this standard testing also gives a grade. This grade, like, whoever gets the best grade is right. There's
Yeah,
only
or like
one
the
right
best.
answer.
Yeah.
You know, and this really, as you said, it limits your opportunities. It limits your creative like exploration. You can't really look at different things. There's only one right answer. So
Yeah.
what's the point of looking everywhere else if there's one right way to look?
Yeah.
And that kind of hinders everyone's individual self-expression or their own individuality, just finding their own path. And again, like, memorizing is also like a way of like hindering this creativity, because a lot of kids when we're younger, I think a lot of people can relate to this. As a kid, we're like, but why, but how, we're really
those
like
questions.
curious.
Yeah.
And then at school, even, for example, you learn this new concept in biology and you're like, oh, like, how does that work? Why does that work? And then the teacher's like, don't worry about it. Just memorize. Like, that's how it works.
Yeah.
That memorization, and you're like shutting down these questions, shutting down this curiosity, it takes away from the creativity. That's what separates everyone, their own individual creativity, their own individual thoughts. And by saying just memorize it, like, it's fine, like, you'll just be tested on this, like, just memorize it,
Yeah, exactly.
that takes away so much from the authenticity of a person. Yeah, and just that individuality, you're taking away their creative rights almost. Like, just memorize it, it's okay, like, that's what you'll be tested on, don't worry about anything else.
Yeah, exactly. Like I just feel like schools just oftentimes like reward the convergent way of thinking, or like finding a single correct answer, like what you mentioned earlier, like the standardized testing, standardized grading. They all tell your brain like there's only one right way to do so. And when you do it a different way, you're kind of seen as like you can say maybe like an outcast, or like just people think you're weird, or maybe because you think differently, when you maybe take these standardized tests, you don't get the grade, or a good enough grade for your own expectations, and that's kind of the issue to this. And after years of these, just one way of thinking, that convergent thinking, your brain sort of stops offering creative possibilities,
Yeah.
because all this time, for years, they haven't been reinforced. And you don't, like, necessarily, you don't really lose creativity, rather you lose the habit of using your creative mindset. And so think of it as like, it's like at the back of your brain, but your brain just kind of gave up on trying to find all of that.
Yeah, and I think that's such a negative aspect of education.
Yeah.
Because, yes, while we're allowed to learn more, we also just lose the ability to almost think for yourself. Like, you're given a right way to think, and anything else, like, you won't be rewarded for it. So, why bother? You know? And that's so, like, detrimental. Like, for example, have you ever, like, had maybe, like, a test and there was, like, 2 or 3 keywords that your teacher expected, and if you had, like, a synonym or something that wasn't, like, exact, you didn't get the mark. And that
Yeah.
just shows, like, you had, like, a slightly different way of thinking. It was still right, but
It's
it was just,
still the right concept. It's still the right idea. It's just
yeah,
that one word that you may not have added into your answer cost you
Yeah.
an entire mark, which could
Yeah.
potentially impact your entire grade.
exactly. And just, like, obviously it's not a direct reflection of creativity,
Yeah.
but that almost is like a metaphor. Like, you were close, you had a little bit of a different thought.
Yeah.
It was still the right concept, but you're not rewarded for it.
Yeah.
You, like, it wasn't enough.
Exactly.
And that's so, like, you're just promoting one correct path, one correct
Yeah.
answer, instead of anything else that strays like a little bit. It's incorrect.
And like that's honestly kind of ironic, because you have all these standardized ways of grading, of testing, yet at the end of the day, when students who get their grades, does it really truly reflect who you are as a learner, or is it just only based off of one curriculum that expects you to do things a certain way, right? And so there's so many limitations to that. And honestly, I feel like this entire, just everything in general, this is so paradoxical, because the world outside of school, like the outside world, once you become an adult, rewards creativity. You need to be creative. You need to be, like, for example, innovation, problem solving, and original thinking. These are all skills that matter most in many careers in life. And let's say your boss asks you like, hey, like, I need help thinking of an idea for this project, but you've been so accustomed to do things one way that your brain doesn't really help to think of other alternatives, and that. And so the system, the system designed to prepare you for that world, like, often trains the creativity out of you. And so that's really the negative aspect of that, in my opinion.
Yeah, and for example, when we're gonna be applying for jobs in the future, like right out of your teenage years, you're trying to look for a job. And how do you get a job when there's so much competition for this one position? It's being different by being a little bit more creative, having different ideas. That's how you're differentiated. That's how, you can strive for more. You can achieve more success, by being creative, by being a little bit more different, how your thoughts are more unique. That's how you succeed in life, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
And by hindering that development, by hindering or prohibiting even that creativity in school, that just really emphasizes, in your future, you're not going to be as creative, you're not going to think differently. Everyone's going to be like a derivative of of one way of thinking.
Yeah, exactly. Like, honestly, going back to the standardized ways of learning, like, for example, when you get like an assignment, and let's say you have to write an essay in English class, you have a rubric that tells you exactly what to do to get a higher level, or a multiple choice question that only has one right answer, only a single right answer. And even like quote unquote creative assignments often come with strict guidelines, like what I mentioned earlier with rubrics. And so the message is very, very clear in this case. You have to follow the instructions. You cannot take risks, or else you will not be rewarded with a good grade. And so this divergent ways of thinking, like the kind that asks like, oh, what if, but why, or how, like, and the type that explores these possibilities, that is not graded, and rather it is in practice. And like in recent years as well, like many research has shown that the creative thinking or the creativity scores in children have declined over recent decades, with the most significant drop occurring in kindergarten through 6th grade. And that's such a, like, you're so young. These kids are so young, and I feel like during those years you're supposed to be creative, and kids tend to feel so curious about the world around them and ask questions. And it's so weird that from statistics, like their creativity is like declining by the years, and these are also the years when standardized testing pressure is the highest as well.
Yeah, and this really highlights how students, you're not going to take any more risks because you're not rewarded for it. And so like intellectually, everyone's kind of becoming the same.
Exactly.
This reduction of creativity, this loss of encouragement or incentive to be different or to show yourself differently, or express yourself authentically, it's kind of reduced because it's pointless.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no reward for it. And yeah, so no one's really experimenting with different ways of doing anything because you kind of can't.
Yeah.
As you said, like in English, you're graded with a rubric, or anything really, you're graded with a rubric. There's certain ways that you have to, there's certain things that are right, and anything else is less than.
Exactly.
So this is just showing how there's like less emphasis, less encouragement on being creative.
Yeah.
For lack of a better word.
Yeah, and honestly, I just find all of this like so ironic at the end of the day, because in the future, like if you have or haven't yet applied to a job, when you go to a job interview, obviously your boss or whoever is interviewing you, they want to find someone who stands out from the crowd. They want to find someone who's different. But it's so it's so ironic, because your entire life you've been conditioned to act a certain way, and so has everyone else around you as well. And so when everyone else around you, including you, are prone to act a certain way, how does that prepare you to succeed in life? I feel like that is a question that should be considered and should be, thought about for sure.
Yeah, and also just other forms of creativity, not only like expressing yourself differently, that shows creativity, but like stereotypical, if you will, like creativity, for example, the arts, music, theater, stuff like that. There's less incentive to go into these fields because your reward is less. A lot of people are told you should do engineering, medicine, business, be a lawyer. They're kind of standard, like socially acceptable, benefiting careers.
Yeah.
But then something like being a professional dancer, being a musician, being an actor, these creative careers, or like an artist, these creative careers are kind of less, or looked down upon because because there's a higher risk that you won't get a good reward, because it's like almost I forgot the word, but it's like like you don't know what's gonna happen. So
Yeah,
there's so
exactly.
much consensus that like everyone should just go into like these other fields and don't be creative because you don't know what's gonna happen.
Exactly. So yeah, honestly, I agree with like everything you said, and everything you mentioned. Like what I mentioned earlier, saying how like the irony and how the education system, how it prepares you for the outside world, you can kind of say, is not really ideal. At the same time, there's also lots of limitations to the outside world, like what you said. The limitation of creativity is, I feel like, is everywhere. You can, if you look close enough, it's really everywhere.
Yeah, and there was a study done by NASA, actually, and it showed that 98% of young children were like had a really high level of creativity. They called it a genius level of creativity. I feel like that's a little subjective, but the point is a 98%, such a large percent of the population showed a potential for creativity. But then as children moved through traditional schooling, that percentage dropped significantly. And by adulthood, only a very, very small percentage of those people had genius level creativity.
Yeah.
And so this really just shows how school kind of like diminishes your ability to be creative. It diminishes your incentive to be different, to pursue something different. And that's just a little disheartening almost.
Yeah,
Because
really.
even us, like we've gone through it, we were curious children once too, but
Yeah.
because of schooling we kind of look at everything a little bit more passively or more indifferently. And it's like, well, we can't be creative,
Yeah.
you
It's
know?
like it's because we've been like, or just people in general, like you've been conditioned to act, to think a certain way since you were a little kid. And it's just, yeah, like adding on to what you said, it's just really sad to see how the numbers, the percentages just drop so quickly as children grow up. They see how creativity diminishes. Well, and like at the same time, creativity is what built humanity to where we are, right now, because humans were creative, we were innovative, we have houses now, we have buildings, we have careers, we have so much, we have a currency system, that's how we interact, that's how we make purchases and sell things. And all of this was because of creativity, and it's just because it's just so sad how all of this is just diminishing in the very second.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think creativity should be a characteristic that is looked down upon, or that should be like squished, that
Yeah,
should be like
exactly,
compressed.
condensed. Yeah.
I think it should be something that's rewarded, something that we should focus on more, because how else is humanity gonna develop? How are we gonna innovate? Obviously, of course, we need technology, we need business, we need all of this stuff. That's obviously engineering. All of it is so important. But we also need creativity. We also need to, cherish that like child inside of us
Yeah.
that wants to be curious, that wants to know and wants to be different. We shouldn't
Exactly.
try to reduce that.
Okay, so the last concept we really wanted to touch upon is something that happens a lot when you get to high school, and I'm sure if you haven't experienced it, you probably heard it from someone, or just heard it from someone else who heard it from a different person. But this is burnout. So what even is burnout? I feel like a lot of people use it, but they might not actually know what it means. Now, burnout is kind of a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. So think of it this way, like you're stressed, and then you just continue being stressed. You're just stressed throughout the entire week, and eventually you just crash out and have an emotional breakdown. That is what burnout is.
Yeah.
And it's almost what happens when you're given too much for too long without enough recovery period. So like imagine like another analogy, like honestly imagine your energy is kind of like this smartphone battery, or your laptop battery, your iPad battery, and every assignment, test, and obligation sort of just drains it out little by little. And your sleep, breaks, and doing things I enjoy the most are things and actions that charge this battery back up. And burnout is what happens when you're constantly draining the battery to 1% and only ever charging it to 20% before draining it again. So you don't get back to that 100% of you feeling fully energized. And eventually the battery stops holding a charge altogether, and you're running on just empty battery, and even small tasks just feel so impossible because you have no more energy to give.
Yeah. And so I think burnout is such an important concept because most individuals, we go through school for, well, you have 8 years of elementary school, then another 4 years of high school, so that's 12 years. And then depending on what you do post-secondary, that can be even up to an additional like 10 more years of school. So that's like 22 years of school,
Yeah,
which
it's
is
a lot.
a lot. And if all you have is like 2 months in between every year to recharge, that takes a huge toll on a person.
Yeah, mental
um
health especially.
exactly, and you feel just like everything you do is just for school, or for one purpose, and that leads to a burnout because you're so exhausted mentally and emotionally. And you're like, you feel like spent, you have no more motivation or no more interest to do anything. You kind of go through all of your movements passively. You're like, oh, I don't care anymore. Like, I'm tired. I want to give up.
Exactly.
And you just feel really detached from the world, from your objectives, from what you're doing. And yeah, that's kind of what burnout is. And it's a really like helpless, hopeless feeling within a person.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, like honestly, I agree with everything you mentioned. Like burnout is so much more complicated than what it seems. Like according to research, there's actually three parts to the process of burnout. Number one, the first process are or the first part is you feel drained, both physically and emotionally. You're even tired, even after sleeping. Like have you noticed that sometimes you go to sleep but you wake up and you're still tired?
Yeah.
Many times.
So
Yeah,
many
and
times.
you don't understand why, but the reason is actually because you're burnt out. That's the reason why. And the second part of burnout is detachment. You start to feel disconnected from your school and from your work, and school just feels like really meaningless in general. You ask like, why does any of this matter anymore? It's like this questioning period, because you've been just so tired, so drained this entire time. And the last part is when you feel like you're not accomplishing anything, and even when you're working constantly, nothing just feels good enough. And so yeah, like in general, like burnout is not simple. It is made up of many different parts, and honestly even now it is, you can even think of it as like an epidemic in students, especially I would say more prominent in high school to university students. So common, because the pressure is just relentless. Like there's always a test after another assignment, after another expectations. There's just so many expectations that are put onto such young students whose sole purpose is to learn, to be better, and to grow. And the message is often quote unquote rest when you're done, but you're never actually done. You just
Yeah,
keep
yeah.
going. That's why in an earlier episode we mentioned like sleep, the circadian rhythm. And this is why, like, not getting enough sleep, and then you just keep on working, you're on autopilot and you never get rest. It's just like you just keep going until your body and your brain forces you to stop. And it's just when you get to that point, like back to the battery analogy, once you get to 1%, that's already too late. Like you're already getting to like, you're pushing your body too much. It's just not good for
You're
your
already
mental.
burnt out.
Yeah, exactly. And you shouldn't ever get to that state. Like getting to that state already is just really bad.
Yeah, and especially for, as you said, like high school students, post-secondary students, the amount of academic workload that someone experiences, or the constant evaluation, the constant pressure of just trying to, uphold yourself, trying to be good enough for your education, is really takes a toll on someone mentally because of how much pressure is just internalized. And also just trying to balance school with extracurricular activities, or trying to balance school with anything else really, because school takes up so much of your time. Trying to allocate enough time to anything else is just really difficult. It can also lead to burnout because you have no more time for yourself, or to sleep, or to just take a second and rest. Yeah, and so that lack of rest, that lack of that inadequate time to just take a breath really, really impacts someone, especially if you're trying so hard to do so much. You only have 24 hours in a day, you need 8 to 10 hours to sleep. The rest of your time is, at school, or doing a sport, or doing an extracurricular, and you just have no more time for yourself. And that is what perpetuates that burnout. That is really just that just takes a toll on you,
Exactly.
emotionally and mentally.
Yeah, for sure. Like, maybe some of you guys have heard of the term fight or flight mode. So, this is like when experiencing your burnout, your nervous system actually stays in this fight or flight mode for months or years, or maybe we can start with like a couple hours until like years, and who knows, and eventually your body just crashes out. And we see like the effects of burnout. It's just so negative. On I don't think there's a single benefit to burnout.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah,
Aside
this
from
is
like forcing yourself to rest, but it's not
exactly.
like good. It's not good rest. You're just
Exactly.
like
Your body isn't actually, taking in, actually resting. It's almost like you're forced to do so. It just disrupts your circadian rhythm and everything. And a study or a survey conducted in 2021 actually states that around 80% of teenagers around the age of 13 to 17 said that anxiety, depression, and several other mental health illnesses were a major problem among their peers, and academic stress was constantly cited as the top stressor if you were to ask. And even if you go around or go to high school, go to university, conduct your own survey, maybe ask a couple of people, oh, what's something that you're most stressed about right now? Someone might say, oh, maybe midterms, or yeah, I have a test next week. It is most of the time you'll probably get an answer related to education, and just from that alone, we can kind of see the big issue in this.
yeah, absolutely. And because of this burnout and this so much academic stress and pressure, this ironically actually leads to less motivation for learning because you have so much to do, and you're like burnt out. You don't want to do it anymore. You kind of get into this like almost like existentialist mindset where you're
Yeah,
like nothing matters anymore. Life is meaningless. It's hopeless. Like why am I even here? Like I'm just gonna die at the end of the day. Why
yeah,
do I care
exactly.
anymore? Um, and that now you have no motivation for learning, no concentration on anything because you just don't care. Like you're burnt out. You don't want to do anything anymore. Now you're more prone to being like irritated or
Mm-hmm.
frustrated or moody even.
Yeah.
And you just feel like hopeless. Like there's just no point. Like it's hard to get yourself out of bed every day to do something that you don't want to do anymore because you're
Mm-hmm.
tired
Yeah,
at the end
for
of the
sure.
day.
Exactly. Yeah, Vienna, I do have a question for you,
Mm-hmm.
actually. So, you know how, as an IB student as well, on top of having multiple skating classes, in a week, having to tackle with homework and tests, studying for tests, how do you deal with all of this?
I think obviously like as an IB student, there's a lot of emphasis on education. Like you have to be good enough. Your grades
Yeah,
have to be good enough. But also as a competitive figure skater, like um you also have to perform well. Like
there's so
um
many
yeah,
expectations.
so much pressure, like competitions and just practicing and all of it. It's a lot, and I think throughout high school there I have had periods of time where I felt burnt out, where I didn't care about school and I didn't care about skating. And that feeling, it's really hard. I wouldn't ever wish on anyone, but the reality is most people go through it.
Yeah, it's more common than you think,
Yeah,
really.
and it's just really hard because we're trying to balance everything. We're trying to be good at everything, but because of that, there's no your time isn't allocated anywhere efficiently, and you're putting too little time and too much. And so you want to be perfect at everything, but then you just end up being not good enough at anything
Yeah,
is the reality. And so that also leads to burnout, just trying to do everything all at once and then never
exactly.
being good enough, and you're like, oh, I don't care.
Yeah.
And it's hard. And so um for me, I think I don't really know how I
Yeah.
do it, but I just know for sure there have been so many times um where I was like, oh, I can't do this
Oh,
anymore.
yeah,
Like
for
obviously
sure.
you force yourself to do it because discipline and expectations and
Mm-hmm.
everything, but there are many periods of time where I was like, I don't care. Like I'm tired.
Yeah, like I feel like burnout isn't really, obviously, it's not something that people want to go through. It's something that just happens naturally, because especially once you get older, once you experience like the harsh conditions of just education, keeping up with your classes, it really just happens, and there's no way you can really stop it, because in my opinion, I feel like it's really a cycle. Like it's just a cycle every week. And like honestly, there's been times where even me, I just feel like I'm doing the same things every day, every
Yeah, yeah,
week.
yeah,
I go to
exactly.
school, I come back, I do work, maybe get some hours of sleep, and then go back to school the next day. It's just so competitive, you know? And like even like as IB students, like we even know our learning environment is extra competitive, is very competitive as well. And I feel like that itself just worsens the process of burnout.
Yeah, and when you said how this is like a cycle,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't that also tie into this like lack of creativity?
Yeah,
Because there's no
exactly.
creativity, there's no anything different, everything's just the same, it's standardized. Now it's a cycle, now there's no creativity.
Mm-hmm.
But if we introduce some creativity, something more, something new,
Mm-hmm.
then maybe things would be a little different, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, so we discussed a lot of these like impacts psychologically on students because of education and how they feel, imposter syndrome, burnout, this reduction of creativity. But what are some solutions or something we can hope for in the future?
Well, there's actually been a lot of research done upon this topic. For instance, like several psychologists and educators are currently, and hopefully in the future as well, like studying the impacts of academic
Mhm.
stress on developing brains. So like teenagers, even some university students. And research has shown that chronic stress can actually change brain structure, particularly in areas related to memory and emotional regulation.
Oh, I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
exactly. And so there's more growing, and as a result of that, there's actually positively been more growing interest in something called a SEL program. So SEL stands for Social Emotional Learning Programs. And these programs basically teach students how to manage stress, build resilience, and develop self-awareness alongside academic skills. And honestly, in my opinion, I feel like this doesn't necessarily have to be like a individual program outside of schools, where students can attend if they want to or not. I feel like honestly this is something that we can integrate into these education systems, where regularly students are reminded of how to deal with their emotions, how to deal with, all this stress. Especially our last episode, we mentioned the science behind being a teenager, and it's just all these emotions that we go through this developmental phase. It is really difficult to find like the light at the end of a tunnel. Really, you're just trapped in this hole of just darkness.
Hmm. Yeah, and um obviously there are some, as you mentioned, like these
Mm-hmm.
programs that are like concrete, like I wouldn't say tangible, but almost like almost, tangible ideas that like can be implemented. But at the same time, just more support is also just something
Yeah,
that can
for
help.
sure.
More mental health support in schools, not only having guidance counselors, but also just being educated or having just people to go to, someone to
Yeah.
talk to, someone to help you, can really help. So, for example, counseling services, obviously, your guidance counselors you can talk to. But I've talked to so many people who are like, I'm not comfortable going to my guidance counselor to talking about
Exactly.
this. Because when you think of guidance counselor, you think of, let me fix my courses, let me drop out of this program.
Yeah.
That you don't really think about, I have mental health issues, let me talk to them. So maybe more counseling services or even like wellness programs
Mm-hmm.
can really help if those are implemented.
Yeah.
And obviously, education on these issues also is a huge, huge thing. Just again, knowing you're not alone, knowing there's people to help you,
Mm-hmm.
um, is huge. And this can help manage stress, pressure, academic anxiety. All of that can really help.
Yeah, and like even just slightly touching outside of education alone, I think that parents can also even sometimes be more welcoming in terms of like when their kids are struggling in school, maybe finding out the root cause of it. Because I feel like parents, in comparison to let's say guidance counselors or social workers, understand their kid to a much larger extent, and so I feel like having that support at home really creates a good foundation, a very a good, yeah, standard foundation in which a kid feels safe, in both environments.
Yeah, and obviously adding on to that, at school, your peers, your parents, I think everyone should be emphasizing having like a growth mindset. And this psychologists have seen that emphasizing, placing an emphasis on just like that it's okay to make mistakes,
Exactly.
like you're
Yeah.
trying to reduce that fear of failure. And because it's a part of learning, you make mistakes and you learn from it. And so this can increase resilience. It can really help students not reach that burnout phase almost.
Exactly, yeah.
So yeah, everyone around you should just be like encouraging a growth mindset. Like if you mess up on a test, I won't be like, oh, like Rosie, like you suck, it's the end
Yeah,
of it for you.
exactly,
Like
yeah.
it's okay, like you learn from your mistakes and move on. I think that's so important.
Yeah.
For everyone to be emphasizing that.
Yeah, and honestly, just adding on, like I feel like teachers in general could also, not saying that there is a big issue revolving this. I'm saying like, in some cases, teachers could also be more aware, more like socially aware that when a student makes a mistake, it's not the end of the world. Like what you mentioned, like if they get the wrong answer, if they maybe just make tiny mistakes in class, maybe like um break like a science like experiment, like I don't know, just like any science experimental like apparatus,
Yeah.
exactly, like it's not the end of the world, right? Like I feel like just creating like a more peaceful environment in school could definitely enhance like one's ability to feel motivated to even come to school, to even show up, I feel like.
Yeah, and the same thing with at school. A lot of universities or high schools, they're trying to experiment with new assessment methods, because so that it's not directed towards one correct answer or towards one rubric. It's a variety of things that are correct. So this can again lead to, you mentioned that like that cycle. We're trying to break that cycle with
Yeah.
this, or we're trying to introduce more creativity, because instead of one right answer, there's a plethora of ways to get there now.
Exactly.
Yeah, stuff like that. And there's also, this will also allow students to demonstrate knowledge in different ways beyond just a standardized exam, which leads to pressure, imposter syndrome, because you think you're not good enough to be there in comparison to everyone else. Stuff like that. Just like trying to rethink assessment methods, is I think a great solution. Maybe not perfect or not ideal, because obviously exams are a standard way to test everyone's knowledge, but it's a way to benefit teenagers or young adults in general, mentally, emotionally, psychologically.
Yeah.
I think that could be something we can see in the future, maybe.
Yeah, and that's honestly, in my opinion, a really great improvement. And I feel like as we move on, as we move forward, as the years go by, I think in the future, we should be a more innovative society and like focus a lot on the growth of students in high school, in elementary school, in university, because we are the future. Like we are going to be a part of the working force, the working generation, and it's so important that we learn how to deal with all these stressful moments in our lives.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, honestly, I think overall, we're not trying to like undermine what education has done for us,
Yeah.
because as I said earlier, it's such a huge part of our lives, and it has benefited society, benefited us so much, and we're obviously incredibly grateful. But there are just some flaws, as there is for everything.
Yeah.
Just some things that can be improved on, or some things that just aren't talked about enough. For example, the mental health of students.
Yeah.
And so we're just trying to bring light into this issue. Obviously, not to saying that education is bad, but just saying there are some issues that should be discussed a little bit more.
Yeah. Now, we've covered a lot of topics today. We've talked about the feeling of being a fraud, like imposter syndrome, the quiet loss of creativity, reduction of creativity, as well as the exhaustion of burnout. And all of this these aren't just personal failures, personal failings of students. They're predictable responses to a system that sometimes may ask too much while giving too little in return. And we just want to let all of you know that no matter what, like, you are not alone in feeling this way at all. And maybe the student next to you, or the one who looks like they have it all together, like, they might be feeling the exact same, you know, the high scoring student in class who always gets the best marks, in comparison to the other student or another student who doesn't do as well in school. They could be feeling the same exact way. They could be experiencing the same burnout, just everything all at once. And so just this is just something to keep in mind, that you are definitely not alone, and there are many resources out there that you could just, you know, reach out to. And as we mentioned, like, as time goes on, like, we hope that, you know, this could be more, this education system could be more innovative in some cases, in some terms.
Yeah, exactly. And just like a, you know, like a final thought. So education, it's a system, and it's typically designed to measure intelligence, but maybe it should be more to nurture curiosity, creativity, and just confidence in students, rather than how smart are you. You know, so maybe the real question isn't whether or not students can handle academic pressure, but how education systems can evolve and change to help students succeed without sacrificing well-being or creativity.
Yeah, and maybe a final question for you guys to maybe think about, is that if you could design or redesign maybe something about the education system to maybe protect your mental health, what's one thing you would do? Just one small thing.
Yeah. Okay, so that's all we kind of have for
Yeah, for
today's
this episode.
podcast. So once again, my name is Vienna.
And my name is Rosie.
And today we talked about the psychological impacts of education and how this can negatively impact the well-being of students. So we mentioned imposter syndrome. We mentioned the reduction of creativity, as well as burnout, which are all very, very important concepts to highlight. Yeah, so we hope you learned something new today.
Yeah, because we for sure did.
Yeah, thank you for tuning in and watching us.
All right, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.